version. It will not be the same as usual. I am on the road this week, and so you are going to get the raw audio sample this week. No fun intro. Apologize for that. But welcome in. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe. Today we are talking about Penn State's scare in Minnesota, the 26-25 win over the Golden Gophers. I don't even know if they're called the Golden Gophers anymore. I feel like no one ever uses that. But we're going to get right into the show. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Corey Lestochi. With me, as always, the great Shawn Kane. Shawn, a little sleepy as we kick this off at 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday morning. How are you doing today?
I mean, I'm almost speechless from the game yesterday, Corey. It was just a roller coaster of emotions, but we ended it up on top. So that's all that really matters. And when you look around the college football landscape yesterday, not only did Penn State win, it ended up Penn State, in my view, got some help with Ole Miss and Alabama going down.
Yeah, I kind of
and Indiana.
The end of this episode, kind of like we did last time, have a little landscape kind of overall where is Penn State sitting right now. But I think the common thing we've had this year over and over has been Penn State continues to win and other people continue to lose. And by default, that's going to be good for you. The SEC brass will continue to say Penn State doesn't deserve to be top 5. But they continue to find ways to win. Shawn, you tweeted this last night and helped me out. Penn State has gone undefeated on the road in the Big Ten for one of just 3 times since they've joined the Big Ten. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, 1994, 2009, and your 2024 Penn State Nittany Lions. So that's it.
Insane kind of stat to me because, I mean, even under James Franklin-led teams, you think there would have been more. But again, playing Michigan or Ohio State on the road every year doesn't necessarily help things in that regard. But still kind of a crazy stat.
Yeah, thank God we have the edit button because I think I said twice and I was like, I meant to say, at first I was going to say twice since 1994, but then I thought, I'll say Big Ten. And I was like, I forgot to go and change that. So, so yes, 3 times.
So are you trying to give a shout out to Elon Musk to start the show?
Yeah, well, Elon also makes us pay for that edit button, but we don't pay for it.
No. No, I actually tried to edit something this morning and it wouldn't let me do it. So I
know after an hour, I think you can't do it anymore.
Yeah, it was only 15 minutes. It still wouldn't let me. I don't know why. But
well, the website still doesn't work, right? Because you know they fired 90% of their employees, so turns out not really efficient.
Welcome in, everybody. If you're watching live on YouTube, make sure to say hi. I see Franklin Fanatic has already stopped it and said hi. Penn State gets the win over Minnesota, 26-25, a game in which they held Minnesota just 6 points in the second half, which ended up being a pretty big deal. There's a lot of scoring in that second quarter. 28 points scored by both teams in the second quarter. Only 16 points were scored in the second half the rest of the way. So kind of interesting in that regard. Shawn, I think I will just have to beat on the drum to start off this whole episode. I feel like, to make sure I record this, I'll probably want this recorded. If I can find where everything is. Here we go. Yeah, I just feel like we almost have to start this episode talking about James Franklin and the job he did in the second half. You can maybe talk about not being prepared enough, maybe looking ahead, letting the outside noise come in. But what Franklin was able to do during the game, which often is where he receives most of his criticism for, his ability to calm Drew Aller down when Aller was visibly frustrated after the decision to let Tyler Warren punt it. The ability and decision to run the fake punt to Luke Reynolds for 32 yards on his own side of the field, where a field goal would have won the game for Minnesota, was incredibly gutsy. And then to continue that and to go for it 2 more times on 4th down and shorts, one by QB sneak, in which they went fast, which I loved. And then by another time, I just putting the ball in his best player's hands and letting him make a decision. Aller was able to kind of keep the play alive and then finds his old reliable Tyler Warren to seal the day. Those handful of moments, although maybe you could say, yeah, he should do that, I still think really impacted this football game. And to kind of get the vibe of the game and then to decide to just say we want to win it, I think is a huge testament to him. And I feel like he's done that a couple times this year. So perhaps a slight transformation, but for all of the criticism that he receives, James Franklin in game helped his team win on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. Because I think that also speaks to his feel of how the game was going. Because I don't know about you, Corey, when Drew gets stopped short, there was just a pit in my stomach that formed. Like, they're going to drive down here and win on a field goal. And I hated feeling that way, but it was just a feel for it, a feel for it. And for Franklin to run a fake punt pretty deep inside his own territory, yeah, that's him putting the cojones on the table and saying, I'm winning this game now, and I'm not going to give this ball back to you. And then it's not only the fake punt, which was brilliantly executed. I want to shout out I want to shout out Ruley too on that on the fake punt. Everybody talked about Luke Reynolds. He had a nice run, but Ruley was the first name Dominic Ruley. I don't think we talked about him at all
No.
here before. But he's one of those unsung heroes on the team that doesn't really get the buzz. But they had called the fake punt. And the way it works on a fake punt, Franklin explained this at his press conference. If they don't get a good look from the defense, it's on Dominic Ruley. He's the quarterback of the play to audible out of it. So they end up going with it, and then he throws the lead block for Luke Reynolds to spring him for a 32-yard run. So want to make sure I mention him. And then you have another 4th down. You QB sneak it, and then you have another 4th down to close the game. We put the ball in the air.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Just one of the common, like Corey said, one of the common criticisms of Franklin is sometimes he doesn't try to go when he coaches scared, and I think the truth in that is a little bit mixed. But you can't say that yesterday because he coached to win the game 120% yesterday. And I think barring any kind of disaster against the Turtles, punched his team's ticket to not only a playoff, but a home playoff game.
Yeah. I think, they are in a front row seat to get a home playoff game now. That ball on that 4th and 1 on the fake punt was snapped at Penn State's 34. So you're looking at Minnesota potentially needing 1 first down to feel really good about a field goal to win the football game. So huge
and
there.
The kicker was very good yesterday too.
And the kicker was good.
I think he would have made it.
And just again, the feeling that out and not saying, hey, I'm gonna let my defense win it, saying no, we have the ball, we're gonna end up taking it. They end up running 12 plays for 72 yards, 5:48 off the clock to win the game. I mentioned this on my own Twitter, but PJ Fleck is a mastermind of milking the clock. As soon as he gets a lead in the game, he's going to work the clock almost inevitably. He continued to do that during the second half of this game. I mean, you look at some of these drives, 9 plays, 5 minutes off in the second half. 6 plays, only 6 plays, and they still took 4 minutes off the clock on their third drive in the second half. And then on their last drive where they decided to kick the field goal when they were down just 26-22. They went 11 plays, 67 yards, and took another 6 minutes off the clock. Compared to Penn State's drives in the second half, which were 7 plays for 240, 5 plays for 158, 7 plays for 302 before sitting on it on that final 12 play, 548 off the clock. So Minnesota was milking it and trying to limit possessions, and there is some poetic justice to be able to run out the clock against a PJ Fleck-led team to seal the deal. I think that's kind of like a Minnesota does this on purpose, assuming they're going to get another chance, and they're going to limit how many possessions Penn State has to score on them. But in the end, it was their own milking of the clock that doomed them.
Yeah, it was kind of the reverse of what happened to us against Ohio State, right? Where Ohio State got the ball back with a little over 5 minutes left, and we never got the ball again.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure. And Cory, watching the game, we did pretty much everything we needed to do to lose.
Yeah, not great.
How many games, think about like the whole history of Penn State, where we gave up a block punt, do we win?
Right.
That just seems like the ultimate horrible omen, like something bad something really bad is about to happen.
Like your house has been marked.
Yes. Because if you think about that sequence, Drew misses Liam Clifford in the flat. We get a pump blocked, and then they do a flea flicker, which we're completely fooled on.
Again.
Oh man, just again, yes. And then you get the extra point blocked. Not only is it blocked, they return it back for 2 points. And that's a 3-point swing right there on one play. So we did really everything we could do to lose the game. But the difference between this team and a lot of teams in the past is it didn't effing matter. We won the game. And that's all that really matters. I mean, it had all the recipe for an upset. Like you said, Minnesota gets the lead early. They lead most of the game. Doesn't matter. Penn State finds a way to do it. And I think it speaks a lot to the mental toughness of this football team. And in years past, I think that was missing in a lot of years. But not this team, because pretty much the same exact thing happened to them at USC. They won. A similar thing happened. They're losing at halftime to Wisconsin. Their backup quarterback has to play the rest of the game. They won. They screw up 25 ways from Sunday yesterday. They still won. They find ways to win, and that's a credit to the grittiness of this team, and it's a credit to James Franklin too.
No doubt. And I think that's going to serve them well at some point here. At some point here in the future, whether that's in a playoff game or something like that. I guess the only thing that I am really upset about with this was the defense. Look, the special team stuff, that's going to get corrected. The block punt, actually, it was Luke Reynolds who messed up, which Nick Dawkins said afterwards that Luke Reynolds was pretty upset at halftime. And that's why I love this sport is you have the opportunity. It's one of the best redemption sports out there to have a chance to fix and completely forget about something that happened earlier in the game. So really cool about that. I forgot who the lineman was on the field on a PAT who stepped the wrong way. I think it was a defensive lineman.
Yeah, I think it was Caleb Artis.
Artis, that's right. Those kind of things get corrected and fixed. In fact, they got corrected during the game when Penn State kicked the field goal. But one thing that I think did stand out to me was that Minnesota was able to move the football more than I would have liked them to do. They're not a very good offense. And look, at this point, you just assume that Tom Allen's going to give up a touchdown in the first drive of the game. So I'm not even going to talk about that because whatever. You give up a 9-play, 70-yard drive on your opening possession. Penn State's offense went 3 and out in theirs. So that's not good, but I'm just at this point expecting Tom Allen to give up a touchdown in the first drive. I don't know what other teams are doing from a script perspective, but if we're that predictable that their opening scripts are always working, but that just seems to be the case every time. But besides that, there were still a couple of drives that were just a little too leaky, and we've had this conversation before. They did, when you look at the results, have some very, very good drives. The next drive was a punt. The following drive was a field goal. The drive after that was an interception, then a punt. Then the one play right after the fake or the blocked punt they scored on, which whatever, let's not even blame them for that. But even in the second half, 9 plays, 51 yards, that did end up in a field goal, but still you let Minnesota run 5 minutes off the clock and hold on the ball for 51 yards. Um, the best drive that they had was a 3-and-out in the second half that then resulted in a Penn State touchdown. They were kind of gifted the fumble, in which Minnesota was sort of moving the football. And then again, even late, once Penn State's taken the lead 26-22, they still let Minnesota drive down the field 11 plays, 67 yards, another 6 minutes off the clock to get the game within 1. And again, it's not terrible. That's not even bad defense, Shawn, but it's just a little leaky where you're like, I would like to see them shut the door. And they didn't really ever shut the door. I thought there was opportunities to. In fact, you could argue the Penn State offense is the reason why the door wasn't shut, because at that one point there, you know, Penn State goes touchdown, interception, and then they go 4 plays minus 5 yards when they kick the field goal to tie it up at 10-10. The defense gave the offense a chance to score right there. Then there's another punt by Minnesota, and then the offense goes 3-and-out yet again, and that's when the field goal is blocked. So there were some opportunities early by the defense to shut the door that the offense didn't capitalize on. But in the second half, I just feel like we're continuing to let drives extend, and some of that was due to penalties. I think we had 2 more offside encroachment penalties, but there's also just some sloppy tackling that keeps them in a scheduled down and distance. And I'm just overall frustrated that we're not shutting the door, Shawn, as much as we should against teams like Minnesota.
Yeah, the bad tackling stood out, especially in the first half. Just a lot of missed tackles, a lot of plays too, where we have them back, behind the line, and then they still end up getting 2 or 3 yards. And those add up. You know, those are 5-yard swings right there, where it goes from being, a pretty disastrous play to them to not really being that bad. So those make a difference. I thought, again, middle of the field was open a lot. And I thought it was probably the cornerbacks' worst day. I didn't think the 2 SEC transfers really played all that great for the first time all season. And yeah, I think one of the biggest plays in the game was the fumble right around midfield. And
Right.
granted, we only kicked a field goal on that. I wanted to see us score a touchdown, but we got something. But what if it's field goal the other way? Or what if it's worse the other way? So, because they were moving the ball pretty well, and Penn State ended up on the receiving end of a gift. So you'll take your Christmas gifts early for sure, because that was one. So yeah, overall, I think the defense, it didn't. One thing that I tweeted about too, just a lack of 3-and-outs. It just feels like this defense doesn't suffocate really anybody. Now they're good; they are a good defense, but I know you mentioned Tom Allen's defense. You just assume they're going to give up points the first drive. Just assume they're going to give up a first down.
Yeah.
Because they do it against everybody. Now, a lot of times they won't give up multiple first downs or, 4 or 5 first downs, but they're going to give one up. I think we only have 1 3-and-out yesterday, and it's actually a pretty big one that we got
Right.
toward the middle of the third quarter. But I just want to see them be more suffocating, and being that they're not, you need to tackle well. And yesterday they just didn't do a very good job of it, but they did enough to win the game, and that is what matters.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that fumble. I mean, that drive had really kind of just started, but Minnesota was moving the ball pretty well. The ball was at the 50-yard line when the fumble happened. So they were moving it into Penn State's territory yet again. And I was curious about this. So they threw a flag on Max Brosmer, the Minnesota quarterback, for illegally batting the ball. And Penn State ended up recovering and they picked up the flag. I don't know what the rule is on the penalty for illegally batting the ball, but I don't know why it was picked up, because regardless of who recovers the fumble, it looked pretty obvious to me that he did purposely. He had one hand out there and he knew he was going to be able to pull it back in, and it literally did look like he hit the ball away in order to maybe have somebody else pick it up. So I don't know what the penalty is, and if it should have just been picked up or if it should have been called and accepted, and maybe there wasn't even an additional yardage added on.
Yeah, maybe one of those deals that's only enforced if Minnesota gets the ball, but I don't know that for sure.
You could also argue illegally batting the ball out of bounds to prevent a turnover would be illegal too. We see it on kick returns, but I think that's different because it's a kick versus or I should say onside kick returns where the guys purposely hit the ball, but that's a kick. I think you're allowed to do that to a certain degree.
I think Shaka Tony got called for that once at Michigan, I think in the COVID year. And I was perplexed by it. I remember being very
because people hit it out all the time. But you know, I remember one time Troy Polamalu like lightning punched a football, and they didn't call it then either. But I didn't know, like, if you have an illegal batting of the ball and then your team recovers it, is that it? Then does the other team get the ball? Like, how do you even go about that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, and I was so confused because it took the officials a little, like, a, not a big amount of time, but I was like, what's the flag? Because the play happens so quick.
Yes,
so I was like, it's too early for a fumble or for a hold or anything.
That's exactly what I said.
Nothing
I was like,
developed.
There's no way it could be anything else. But
yeah.
But I didn't know if there should have been, because like he did do it regardless of who recovered it. But again, I don't know. I don't know exactly how that is. Shawn, Drew Aller didn't necessarily have his fastball on Saturday. Ends up 21 of 28, which again is above 70% completion. I think Tyler Donahue had the stat, but I think he has like 7 or 8 games above 70% completion. He had 3 last year. So he's really doing a great job from a completion percentage. Yards per completion were 8.7. He did have a passing touchdown. He also ran the ball 9 times, technically for 8 yards. But the touchdown run was fabulous. He actually inflicted some pain on the defender who hit him as he was going across the goal line. That guy was down for a little bit. So he was running angrily. He was fired up in this game. He did have some good throws, but he also had some decent misses. Just, again, didn't seem like he was – I think he's pretty streaky, Shawn. I mean, when he has confidence, I feel like he can zip the ball wherever the heck he wants to. The one throw that Tyler Warren was very impressive. But then other times he just really struggles, and it's very much to me a momentum confidence thing. When he gets his feet right and delivers it correctly, he's very good. But there was times on Saturday where I thought his feet kind of stopped and he just was using arm too much, and he wasn't able to make some of the simpler throws.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night, and I didn't know whether to say it today or to wait till Thursday or Wednesday or whenever we're doing our show. But I'll just say it now. One of the things that I was wondering about with Drew, well, one of the things I thought about Drew was this is going to be his last season at Penn State. I thought going into the season, he's either going to A, declare for the draft, or B, go to the portal. I no longer think either of those should and probably will happen, because I think Drew needs to come back to college for another year for a lot of the reasons you stated. I just don't think he is ready from a consistency standpoint to handle the NFL. And not only that, throwing guys open, and which I still think he defers to Singleton and Warren too much. Because they may be the only guys he trusts, but you have to have some trust in your receivers. And I think that's just something that he's lacking right now, but you still have to be able to give them a chance to make a play. And I don't think that's something that he is very comfortable with doing right now. And that's what the NFL is all about, and throwing a spots and letting your guys cook, because the quarterbacks are so freaking good in the NFL. There's going to be a lot of times it doesn't look like anybody's open, but you have to throw to a spot. You have to throw guys open, and I just don't think that's something he is very comfortable with yet. Now, he's shown flashes of it, especially
Right.
earlier in the year, but I think he's gone away from it a little bit. He'll still do it with Warren, but you got to do it with everybody. Like, you got to be able to trust your guys enough. And we know the limitations at receiver. Everybody knows that. But you
Right.
still have to, they're still good athletes, and you still got to give them a chance to make a play. And there was times yesterday where there were guys open and Drew just missed them. So some of the plays, I was like, you can't put that one on them not getting open. The Omari Evans deep shot, I thought that was a big play in the game to keep Minnesota in it. Drew, it looked to me like he threw off his back foot and just missed him.
Yeah, I gotta watch that one again. I knew there was some pressure there, but sometimes the pressure's not completely there, and he's thrown off his back foot
Yeah, I
prematurely.
think he had enough room to step up. I'd have to go back and watch it too, but I think he did.
But regardless, you're right. That should have been a touchdown. That was a nice route by Omari Evans, who had a wide open touchdown earlier that I was probably thinking to himself as the ball was in the air, like, just don't drop it, because it was one of those ones where there wasn't a defender near you. The only thing you have to do is catch the football. And all of a sudden it becomes a lot harder when that's the only thing you have to think about. But Omari Evans had that catch. In general, Tyler Warren led the way in receiving 8 catches, 102 yards. Omari Evans had 2 catches for 51 yards, 45 of them on that touchdown grab. Trey Wallace had a couple, the very typical Trey Wallace game where he's anywhere between 40 to 60 yards on a handful of, hitch routes and drive routes. 4 catches, 46 for him. Nick Singleton ended up with 6 catches for 37 yards. Liam Clifford 1 catch for 8 yards. I just want to mention Nick Singleton now, has. I'm trying to look it up real quick here because it's actually pretty impressive. On the season so far, he has 30 catches and 4 touchdowns, 26 catches in all of 2023, 11 catches in 2022. So more catches this year than any year so far. 30 catches is, I believe, don't quote me on this, would be tied for or would be second on the team, behind Tyler Warren, and then obviously doubling the number of touchdown catches from last year. And we still have one more game to go, plus potentially playoffs. So really being more utilized in the passing game in that regard. Shawn, I did want to ask you, and James Franklin was asked about this at the half, and then the very first play out of the half was a run to Kaytron Allen. Did not see very much Kaytron Allen. He was out there, just the ball didn't get in his hands basically until the second half. You think that was just more of the way the game just kind of turned out the way it did, or do you think we really have gotten to this point where Nick Singleton's going to get the bulk of the touches?
Yeah, I kind of tweeted this during the game at halftime, actually, that Kaytron didn't touch the ball. I thought it was a little strange that he didn't, because I don't think it really worked. Because in the first half, I think CBS had the stat up, we were averaging 0.5 yards per rush. So that tells me, yeah, we should probably get Kaytron involved here. But I mean, you look at the final numbers, and again, people lie, numbers don't lie. Kaytron Allen did end up with 7 carries, and he averaged 1.4 yards per rush. So he had 10 yards on 7 carries. So I think it's more so than they have been. I think there's separation between Singleton and Allen. And I think this is probably going to be something you see going forward. And I understand it, because Singleton gives you that next gear. I thought Singleton ran the ball pretty well yesterday. He averaged almost 5 yards per rush. it's especially impressive when you consider we weren't really doing much of anything on the ground in the first half. So most of those yards came in the second half. So I just think Katron and Nick, that gap has grown a little bit. And there have been times, like last year, I thought Katron had a much better season than Nick Singleton. So there are times that it kind of goes back and forth, but right now Singleton's the hot hand, and he has been for a lion's share of the season outside of when he was banged up. So yeah, I think this is something they're probably going away from a little bit. But Katron's still going to have a role on this team for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a weird game because if you look at the stats, you're going to say, hey, Penn State didn't run the ball very well. They ended up with 117 yards rushing. 32 of them came on a Luke Reynolds fake punt. So from that degree, you're like, wow, they struggled. But like you said, Singleton did average 4.8 yards per carry on 13 carries. But some sacks in there didn't help as well. And then just not really running that many times.
Yeah, I think not having Donka really affected things too, because I thought Rucci struggled.
Yeah, he did. And that's a good thing to bring up. And we probably should have spoke about that earlier. Anthony Donka, first series, goes down with an apparent knee injury, was carted off the field. Don't know if you've heard anything, Shawn, but just the assumption is most likely out for the season. I had just the way he was holding his knee and being carted off, hadn't heard anything. I think that's pretty evident that we're dealing with a long-term injury, which Anthony Donka was arguably your best offensive lineman, and one that is still going to be probably a star for Penn State. Still technically a freshman, and they're going to very much miss him at that right tackle spot. I would even argue he was more valuable than even Drew Shelton at the left tackle. I think Drew Shelton still struggles from time to time. I think Anthony Donka was really having a good year and had the shoulder issue and now the knee issue. It's just a shame.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely a big loss. But this is also why you brought Nolan Rucci in, right? Because you didn't have they really didn't feel great about the depth they had at tackle. So this is why you brought in a guy that you're familiar with, the guy that you think can play and has all the tools to do it. I've been impressed at times with Nolan Rucci this year, and then there are times like yesterday where he didn't play that great. And that's gonna happen. He is a backup, but I do feel this offensive line looks a lot better with Anthony Donka. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but I still feel okay about the offensive line going forward with Rucci there.
Yeah.
I said okay, not great.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think okay is a good way to sum it up. I think, you start thinking about the playoff and you're wondering kind of who you'd beat. You really need to, maybe line up with somebody that doesn't have a great defensive line, because that could be problematic. I mean, look, a lot of people are going to talk about Ohio State and what Penn State was able to do and not do against them. I don't think people quite understand that Ohio State arguably has the best defense in the country. They held a good Indiana offense to, I think, 160 yards, 140 yards, basically. Their defense is very, 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 very good, especially that front seven. The linebackers, Cody Simon and them, are just flying around the field right now. They were eating Indiana's lunch. I don't know how many sacks they ended up with. I think it was at least 4 or 5, maybe even 7. So if you had to face a team like that in the playoff without Anthony Donka, you get pretty nervous pretty quickly. But if you're able to kind of skate by them, and I mean, you look like a team like Georgia, who struggled now on defense, believe it or not, feel a little bit better about that matchup, just because UMass, Mississippi State, and even Kentucky were able to find a way to stay around in those games. So it's just really going to depend on the matchup now for Penn State. The good news is you have at least one more game to get Nolan Rucci all of the reps against a Maryland team that is pretty hapless at this point. Shawn, just so fans are aware, Penn State can still go to the Big Ten championship officially. All they need is an Ohio State loss to Michigan. So by no means is it a coin flip.
And a win against Maryland.
And obviously a win against Maryland. Yes, I should probably clarify that. Now Michigan is going to Ohio State. The Wolverines did just blow out Northwestern for whatever that is worth, 50-6. I believe that's the most points they've scored all season. In fact, I don't even know, just looking at their numbers, they technically did score 30 against Fresno State. So that's the second time they've at least scored 30 points. But point being, not a team that typically gets out of the 20s very often. So maybe they found some life on offense there, and maybe they find a way. But if you're Penn State, if you're trying to think of anybody from a underdog perspective that could beat Ohio State to send you to the Big Ten championship, I mean, Michigan's got to be the team that you would feel the best about. I mean, from a blue chip ratio perspective, from an offense defensive line perspective, they're going to be able to match up with them. Do they have the skill guys to compete? Probably not. But if you can play a rock fight type game, you give Michigan, a decent chance to do this, and Penn State would then go to the Big Ten championship and face Oregon, who's already locked in.
Yeah, this game tends to be, the Michigan-Ohio State game tends to be a little closer in a year like this where there is a lot of separation. I think Ohio State has the best team in the country. And Michigan is a mediocre Big Ten team right now. But it tends to always be a little bit closer in a situation like this, historically. But do I think Michigan wins? Probably not. But you never know. And as we saw yesterday, just so many upsets all over. And next week, too, you look around the country and it is rivalry week. Now, we are unrivaled, so we don't worry about that.
That's right.
But Georgia plays Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has been a tricky team for teams this year. They've been a thorn in team sides. And Texas A&M plays Texas. That's a historic rivalry that's now renewed. That's going to be renewed. So there are rivalries here, and teams tend to play their best during them. So would I be very, very surprised Michigan won? Yes, I would be. But stranger things have happened. I never thought Ole Miss and Alabama would have went down yesterday either, but they did. It's college football. And with the portal, with NIL, there's just so much more parity today. I think that's for the good. I think that's for the best.
I think it's very much for the good. And I love seeing Colorado lose on Saturday, too.
Yeah, that was awesome.
For the blog, he says, best thumbnail in YouTube history today. Love the show. Yeah, that was we weren't able to get the graphic from our management team. And so I said, screw it, and just put that up there. We'll see if we can get that replaced at some point, but I wasn't going to not do the show because I didn't have a thumbnail. Before we completely go full big picture on this, Shawn, I just wanted to give some love to the defensive tackles from yesterday. Zane Durant,
awesome.
5 tackles, 2.5 TFLs, completely tore apart in the interior. Devon J. Thomas, 4 tackles, half of a TFL. Keziah Izzard, 2 tackles and half of a TFL. Defense ended up with 9 TFLs on the day. The defensive tackles really kind of stood out. I thought Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton were pretty subdued. Now, part of that was because of the muggings that were taking place out there. And I do not believe a single holding call was called against Minnesota, so take that for what you will. But between the defensive tackles and Kobe King, they played a pretty good day. Jalen Reed ended up having the most tackles with 10, including a half TFL. But Kobe King had some impressive plays. I don't know where they are without Kobe King. 1.5 TFLs for him on the day. He just makes so many big, important tackles. And then just wanted to give some love to Dom DeLuca. We always talk about how he's good, he's not great, but he has continued to make a big play every season when they really needed it. And that interception was huge. I don't know why Gary Danielson thinks he's technically an inside linebacker, but that's okay. Dom had a massive pick when you needed it. He also had half a TFL in the day. These are the games you feel pretty good about Dom DeLuca being out there. Minnesota, not a bunch of talent across the board. He's willing to play in the box, make some tackles, and then he's able to play coverage against Minnesota, and he's able to get that pick at a very big time.
I felt like he got more snaps yesterday, and I felt like Rojas actually got less. I'd want to see the snap count, but I felt like there are a lot of times that DeLuca was in and Rojas wasn't. I do wonder if that's a trust thing with staff. Not that Rojas didn't play much, he did, but just felt like he played more. And then yeah, I thought the defensive tackles played well. I thought early on in the game we were giving up too many runs, as we have said. A lot of times that's not due to the defensive tackles. That's due to the linebackers not filling gaps. That's been an ongoing issue with the linebackers. And one of the reasons, like if Penn State ends up making the playoffs and losing, now these games are completely hypothetical, haven't even happened yet, and we don't even know who we're playing. Good chance we'll be able to look at the linebackers, because they just, outside of Kobe King, they haven't been playing at a championship level consistently this season. But yeah, it was a big play for Dom getting the interception. I thought overall he played all right. But they have to fill holes better. Because they have good defense tackles in front of them, and that's a luxury a lot of linebackers don't enjoy throughout the country. To have 3 or 4 really good defensive tackles that you could trust. Alonzo Ford got hurt yesterday too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I do, we talked at the beginning of the season about how much depth we have at tackle. That depth does get cut down a lot if you lose a guy like Alonzo Ford. Because then you only have
Beeman's
really 3 guys to count on with Hakeem Beeman's departure.
Right. Yeah, that loss, no one was playing better football than Ford at that point. So that one's really tough to see as well. Before we get to For the Bloggies question and kind of zoom out for a second, I do just want to mention too, although a field goal, the PAT was blocked, Ryan Barker did go 2 for 2, including a long of 45, so a big kick there. So I wanted to give him a little bit of love. Riley Thompson's been a little average this year. Obviously, I think even the blocked punt, based off the way it came off his foot and where the guy kind of blocked it from, I think it honestly may have been shanked anyway. It may have literally gone right out of bounds because the ball literally went that way off his foot and right into the guy who was blocking from over here. So I don't know how good of a punt it was going to be anyway, regardless of it. But he hasn't been pitiful or anything like that, but he definitely hasn't been as good as he was last year. And kind of need him to kind of get in a better spot just when you get into these kind of games, especially against a playoff team. There's a lot less room for error. So would like to see some improvement there. Obviously, we talked about the kicking issues and the blocking issues. But all in all, feel like you got to feel really good about the actual place kicking situation than we were, say, in September, which Ryan Barker's been consistent even on the road, which is all you can ask for.
Yeah, no doubt. Ryan Barker's been such a revelation for this team. And yeah, when you consider how, we literally won by points, we needed every single point we could get, and 45-yarder on the road is far from a gimme in college football. Far from it. The block kick really wasn't his fault. There was miscommunication up front, it looked like, and the guy was literally standing right in front of them by the time he kicked it. Where Thompson, I think Thompson has had a worse year this year than he did last season. And sometimes that'll happen with punters, but you need more from him. Because outside of the block too, he's just not helping us much in field position. And I know he could do it. I've seen him do it, but we need more from him right now.
The only other thing I wanted to mention was that Julian Fleming was questionable. Caden Saunders is still out, but Julian Fleming was questionable in this game. Did try to warm up, but did not log a
Yeah.
box statistic. So keep an eye out there. I did think they were trying to get Evans and Wallace involved. And honestly, like, that's all I kind of expect from that group. Like, one or two guys. You're not going to see a flurry of
Yeah, I
different
think we
wide
only played
receivers
3
getting involved.
receivers total.
Yeah.
So
So, yeah, right. And so we'll kind of keep an eye there. Let's jump over to this question since we're just talking about it. For the blog, he asks, if the Michigan-Ohio State game is close in the fourth quarter next Saturday, what will the vibes be like in Beaver Stadium? I almost think it'll be the exact opposite of 2016, weirdly. So I think what For the Blog he's getting at here is, if Penn State has an opportunity to go to the Big Ten championship, or people maybe not overly excited to have to play number one Oregon and potentially lose some potentially very valuable rest. I would argue, I think, and maybe For the Blog he is correct on this, but I would argue there's enough casual fans that are just like, sweet, yeah, Big Ten championship, great. And
yep.
kind of still in the mindset of previous years of, yeah, we want to win the Big Ten championship. Why wouldn't we? Why? What else matters? When there's probably a decent kind of, well, don't you want to host a home playoff game? Don't you potentially want to play a weaker opponent to maybe get some momentum and get one under your belt? Are you going to get annihilated in the Big Ten championship anyway? Are you going to lose out on some potential rest? Well, as we saw in the first drive, Anthony Duncan goes down. You risk potential injuries. And what are you realistically getting out of it based off of the chances you have to win the game? I don't know what the spread would be on Oregon Penn State, but I'm assuming Oregon on a neutral site would probably be 4.5 point favorites at least. And so, again, what percentage do you give them to win that football game versus? Um, I think at this point, Shawn, with what happened in the SEC, I think if they went and they lost, they would still get a home playoff game. But just winning and getting a bye, we don't know yet if that's valuable. It's hard to put a price tag on that. We think it would be a good thing, but we just don't quite know yet. So I like the question, but I think the vibe will still be ecstatic given the level of uncertainty of what that actually means and what the benefit of it will be.
Yeah, they're like, and Corey knows this, being a season ticket holder himself. Even season ticket holders, there are a lot of people that just don't really get the big picture of college football, and they just go, "Oh, we could go to Indianapolis now as long as we win today." And they don't really put too much thought into it. And honestly, I kind of wish I was a fan like that. And not be like a psycho thinking of all these different random scenarios that could happen. Um, I think there would be some more mixed reactions. Whereas in 2016 it was pretty much straight up euphoria. But generally, yeah, I think people are going to be really happy. And I mean, hey, maybe we should be. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to tell people how to feel about that because there are good arguments both sides. I mean, my thing is, if I was told if Penn State loses, nothing bad will happen and they will still get a home playoff game and go if they go to Indy, I'd be fine with it. But I don't believe it. I straight up don't believe it that nothing bad would happen if we go there and lose. I just don't. Because what's going to happen is the propaganda machine is going to get going all night, all morning, and we know what could happen then.
As long as they don't get annihilated, if it would maybe again before this weekend, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But now with Ole Miss losing, with Alabama losing, with A&M losing, the SEC is weaker than it was a week ago. And anyone who wants to argue otherwise is just wrong at this point. There's just not many arguments you can be made for Alabama losing to Oklahoma, which, by the way, Alabama was favored over Oklahoma more than Penn State was favored against Minnesota. So kind of think of it as if Alabama just lost to a team a little bit worse than Minnesota, because that's what the spread was. I think it was 14.5 for Alabama. And so I think there's some room now even if there wasn't any before, even if there was some before, that the Big Ten runner-up is going to host a playoff game. I feel very confident at this point. Now, you potentially go from a 5 seed to maybe a 6 or 7 seed, maybe, and maybe you have a little bit tougher of a draw there. But right now, assuming the just very obvious, if Ohio State beats Michigan, goes to the Big Ten championship and loses to Oregon again, I still think they get the 5 seed. I think if Penn State were to do that, maybe they go from a 5 seed to a 6 seed. But I still think at this point they'll host one, just given the fact that Indiana went from at probably approximately 3 p.m. went from out of the playoff to back into playoff. Like, there is a very good chance now that Penn State, or excuse me, the Big Ten gets 4 teams in the playoff. And realistically, there's also a chance that the SEC only gets 3, just because of the way things are. I mean, the SEC championship is now going to be Georgia versus the winner of Texas and A&M. The only thing that could maybe screw this up is if A&M beats Texas and then beats Georgia, and then they get in. I don't, unless everything works out perfectly, I don't see an A&M who beats Texas but loses to Georgia is automatically given a spot. I would put them obviously above a 10-3 team should be above a 9-3 team, obviously. Right? I think we can all agree that if your third loss is in the Big Ten championship, that is better than your third loss in the regular season. However, I don't think you're going to put a 10-3 A&M over a 11-1 Indiana. And so we're going to have to wait and see how all the spots kind of line up. But realistically, I think you can say the only teams that have a great shot of making it in the SEC are Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. Everybody else has a chance, but they need help to get there. And A&M controls their own destiny, because if they could literally win the next 2 games, and they'd obviously be locked. But if you're looking for help, they're going to need some help if they lose to Texas or if they lose to Georgia in the Big Ten or in the SEC championship.
Yeah. You got to feel bad for the propaganda industry today.
The brass
they are hurting. They are hurting right now. Greg Sankey and ESPN and Josh Pate, that they are hurting right now. That they are bloodied, and that they are confused. They are dazed. It's just a tough scene right now, and you hate to see it. You just hate to see it, because they have their hypothetical spreads and this and that, and this team would be favored, and where'd it go? Where'd it go?
Didn't matter.
Yeah, it turns out these games aren't decided in Vegas. They're not decided in a casino. They're decided on the gridiron. And y'all couldn't beat Florida or Oklahoma.
Or Auburn.
So maybe your precious conference isn't as elite as it once was. And I know that's like an impossible thought to get into their head, but it's not. There is not an elite team. I am going to make a declaration. There is not an elite team in the SEC this year.
I want to say that again.
I am going to make a bold declaration right now. There is not an elite team in the SEC this year. There are really good teams. There is not an elite team, and this is just very hard for some people in the media to comprehend. And I'm talking about the Paul Feinbaums of the world. I am talking about the Greg McElroys, Booger McFarlands, Josh Pates, and they just can't seem to get their head around it. And you just, and again, they're hurting right now. This is a lot of new information from them. But guess what, guys? It's a big new world right now with NIL and the transfer portal. And the Big Ten is here to stay, because we have blue chip programs of our own. And the 2 best teams right now in college football, in my view, and I think the view of a lot of college football fans, it's the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Oregon Ducks. It's a small club, and y'all ain't in it. So that's where we're at right now in college football, and I am very happy to see a changing of the guard because it was a similar story last season. You saw the best team, the two teams in the title game were both from the North. So I think it's a brand new day, and I think a lot of these SEC homers have to get used to it. Not that the SEC is bad. I think they are clearly the second best conference in college football, but there's not an elite team in it. So that's where we're at right now, guys. And I love it because I'm tired of these obnoxious people.
I'd agree with you as far as the two elite teams. That next tier below right now,
Yeah, anybody could beat anybody in that
the
tier.
Georgia, the Bama, Penn State. I don't know who. So I guess Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame.
Texas, Penn State. Yeah, I'd put Notre Dame in there too.
That to me is the next kind of level down below Oregon and Ohio State right now. Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame.
Yeah, because I think
State.
there's separation between them and Tennessee too. I don't think Tennessee's that good.
Yeah, I think then you have another tier below that, which is someone from the Big 12, Bama, Tennessee, South Carolina,
SMU,
Miami.
Yeah,
I think there is some separation there, but it's a mess, right? And as a Bama fan, you cannot sit there and tell me now that you deserve to be even in that second tier at the moment because
they will.
You just got just stoned 24-3 on the road to Oklahoma, and Jalen Milroe kind of came back to earth. I mean, the Jalen Milroe hype after one game was insane, as if we'd forgotten all the other mistakes he'd done this year. He is a very average quarterback, and it showed up yet again. They made him have to throw the football to win. He wasn't able to do so. So I don't know. The landscape is weird right now, and Penn State's in a very good position. I was looking at all the teams that are probably going to be ranked that are going to have to go on the road in the playoff. Again, assuming Penn State doesn't go to the Big Ten championship, I would feel really good against any of them now, as far as hosting them, whether it is the winner of the Big 12, anybody from over there, whether it's Arizona State, whether it's Iowa State, whether it's Kansas State, whether it's Colorado. There's so many teams over there. It's insane. I think West Virginia still has a path now.
Yeah,
it
is
whoever it is.
I
would feel 100% good against anyone out of the Big 12. I would feel good against an Ole Miss. I would feel good against a South Carolina. I would feel good against an Alabama. I would feel good even against Georgia. I would feel good even against Tennessee. Now, there's different levels or priorities I'd probably put on those. But you got to feel good about any of those teams coming into Penn State now, just based off of the lack of consistency from all of those teams. And I guess you have to still throw Missouri in there. I don't know why, but Missouri's still ranked 23rd or whatever.
Well, then we should just put Illinois there too.
Right.
Who somehow won yesterday.
Yeah, which is just crazy. But no, I would say, you feel pretty good. And again, even if you start looking at the second round, which I think we've all kind of set the expectation of, if you get a home playoff game, the goal really should be to try to win that second game. Not that it's going to be easy, but that second game is, I think, what really distinguishes you from having what's going to turn into the typical Penn State season versus it being a good season is winning that second game. And you want to have a good matchup there. Well, you're going to have an ACC champion who's either going to be SMU or Miami. And if Miami loses this week, then potentially Clemson. You feel good about any of those teams in the second round. If it is the Big 12 champion, you feel really good about anyone there. If it's not the Big 12 champion and it is Boise State or Tulane, you feel very good there. Boise State struggled with Wyoming. So regardless, 2 of the 4 seeds that you would play in the second round, you feel very good about. Now, obviously, the SEC champion and the Big 10 champion are the ones you want to avoid. So not having that 8-9 game would be pretty nice. And then you have no idea where the SEC champion is going to land. But those are the 2 that you'd want to avoid regardless. But otherwise, you feel pretty good about making your way into the final 4 teams if you can avoid the Big 10 champion specifically in order to make it to the final 4.
Yeah, one of these things you keep hearing, Corey, and you've probably heard this too, is well, yeah, of course, Penn State's not the top 4 team right now. And you've even heard this from Penn State fans. Why? Why are we clearly not one of the top 4 teams in the country? I'm not saying we are, but how are you going to make an argument that, well, we're not one of the top 4 teams? Okay, well, name them. Ohio State, Oregon, I'll give you. Then who? Then who is definitively better than Penn State? And again, something that I talked about last week. We are making a lot of bold declarations based on incomplete data, based on an incomplete season. We still have another week of football. We still have the conference championship games. So we're making a lot of bold declarations out there without complete data. So you need to let things breathe a little bit. Because, like Cory said, just 3 o'clock yesterday, everybody thought Indiana's out, Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss and Bama lose, and then, oh, yeah, they're back in. That's kind of how this whole season has really gone. Where teams are just much more prone to upsets. So we're making these bold declarations I don't know, Penn State's not one of the top 4 teams. So yeah, I think what you said about getting the right matchups is really important, because if they, I'm assuming we're in all likelihood going to host a game, and it looks like it's going to be a team. Let's say we play a team like SMU, or we play a team like Indiana. Yeah, I think Penn State would be pretty decently big favorites in a game like that. Probably 5 to 7 point favorites in a game like that. And then your next game, if you're playing in Miami, if you're playing in Arizona State, if you're playing a Boise State, yeah, I think you feel really good about that. And again, I feel pretty decent about playing a Texas or a Georgia. I just would. Maybe that sounds nuts, but I think we could beat them. I think it's basically a pick'em, and I think there are hypothetical lines out there where it is a pick'em against those teams.
Yeah, Quinn
And
Ewers
those would be neutral site games too, so we wouldn't have to go to Athens, or we wouldn't have to go to Austin.
Right. Quinn Ewers actually getting an MRI in his ankle, just reported moments ago. So
wow.
Don't even know where they're at there. Shawn, do you have 4 minutes to do a rapid round through these fan questions?
I do. Yep.
All right, let's run through these real quick. Einstein von Braun asks, coaches, players who stay and go after the season. Quickly give me one coach, one player that you think will go, and one coach, one player that will stay.
Abdul Carter will go. Well, you don't mean Portal, right?
No, he just says go.
Okay, Abdul Carter will go. Dreller will stay. Marquise Higgins will stay.
Okay.
Andy Kotelnicki will go.
Okay. I will say Kane Saunders will go. And I will say Omari Evans stays. And
you want Portal? Okay, I like that.
And I will go Trotwine stays. Tom Allen goes.
Oh, wow.
Don't quote
think
me
so?
on that. I don't know. I would like him to be honest with you. It's very hard for me to go from a scheme like Manny Diaz to a scheme like Tom Allen's. I'm very much struggling with that.
I understand that.
I'm not saying he's doing a bad job. I'm just saying he's doing a different job, and I like the other way better.
Oh, I do too. I think I said before, I'm not nearly smart enough to be any kind of coach at all. But I feel like I would want a more in-your-face style defense where you're just trying to wreak havoc. So I'd much prefer Manny style too.
Yeah. Andy Adair says, is playing at Minnesota the Big Ten equivalent of playing at Auburn in the SEC? Weird games, upsets seem to happen at both schools.
I would say Iowa, but I hear what you're saying.
I'd say Iowa too, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah. What do you think is wrong with the run game? Says Devin O'Blakely. Yeah, run game is struggling a little bit. At the end of the day, I think it comes back to the same kind of problem, right? If you can't consistently throw the ball to your receivers and their safeties are keying in on the run, no matter how flashy you get in motion and stuff like that, you still got to block people, and it's harder to block when there's a lot of people in the box. And every once in a while, on a counter, you confuse those people. But end of the day, you got to be able to have weapons on the outside that the defense has to stay honest with. And without that, it makes running difficult, no matter how flashy you get.
Yeah, I think a big thing yesterday too was Donko going out. I know he plays tackle, so he's not on that interior, but
Yeah.
still, he is probably your best lineman. So when he goes out, I mean, it kind of causes, if you played offensive line before, as I have even at high school, just losing one guy in that unit makes a big, big difference. And we didn't have him at all really yesterday. So I think that played a role. But specifically, we've been having more problems running the ball in the second half of the year than we had been in the first half of the year. So I think that I think that's probably a bigger issue, and I think some of it has to do with the teams improving that we played. And Minnesota has a pretty damn good defense, and I think we didn't have an official preview show, but we did talk about them last Sunday. They have a good defense, and we we struggled. So it's something that if if we lose a playoff game, I think a lot of it. I think he could even work around the receivers because Warren is so freaking good. But a big part of the reason why we might lose linebackers and not being able to trust the running game against better competition.
Yeah, Minnesota top 12 defense after today or after yesterday. So definitely a good defense. Mudbug says or asks, how can you not have a good feeling about this team? Shawn, I did want to answer this one. A lot of people going down that kind of this team feels different route, which I think is a very a biased thing to say because I have felt that way at times and I've been wrong in my life about those kind of things. I do think a lot of it stems mostly from blind optimism, just to be completely transparent with you. So I don't necessarily think this team is different yet. I do like the way they've won at USC, at Wisconsin, at Minnesota in games where they really didn't have their fastball and they found ways to get it done. Especially given that each of those games had different issues, right? Your defense really struggled at USC. Your quarterback got injured at Wisconsin. Your special teams took a step back against Minnesota, right? So you found different problems and you were able to overcome those hurdles and obstacles. So that is great. But like, I don't think for me, I turn into this. There's some sort of destiny yet. And again, that can quickly change. But right now, I'm not like in that kind of miracle on ice kind of vibe yet.
Yeah, you want to see it too against the better teams.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a yeah, obviously, but you do. Like if you play against one of these top 11 or 12, one of these top 12 teams, and you have to win a game like we have, I think that's more impressive than doing it against a USC, doing it against Minnesota. But I understand your point. Like, take a look at the 2021 season where we had a lot of close games that we just lost. We lost them all. We played a close game against Ohio State. We lost that one. Played a close game against Michigan. Lost that one. Sparty lost that one. And not to mention the Iowa debacle. So being able to make the big plays late is what's separating this team from a team like that 2021 team that ended up only winning 7 games, but they definitely could have won 11. If in a different universe, they probably do win 10 or 11 games. So it's about making those winning plays at the right time and having that mental fortitude to get through adversity. And I think that's why people feel really good about this team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even my mom said going in the second half, well, at least we were better in the second half. And I think she's watched maybe 8 quarters of football this year. So
That's astute, though.
there's that mentality for you there. Shawn, this is our worst game of the year according to William Gamble. the way they've looked. Why was that? Quickly, one thing that you can point to.
I think not being able to run the ball was huge early, and we really were behind schedule the whole game because of that, and I think that put us in a hole. Not to mention the miscues, but I think take the miscues out of it, we just didn't run the ball well, and got behind, but we ended up making up for it.
Yeah, I just say on defensive side, just not tackling as well as they probably should have either. All right, Stephen Keel mentions not getting a lot of push. We kind of talked about that already. Also says middle D line, other than 28, do not make plays. Kind of rebuted that already, given the TFLs that Devon had, given what Kazai Izzard had. Thought the defensive tackles actually had a really good day. He also doesn't care about the Big Ten championship, to kind of go back to one of your things that you were talking about earlier. Jeff Madrick says, Katron looks pretty washed. Is he wrong? That's our last question.
I don't want to say washed, but I think the thing with Katron, I think it's fair to say he hasn't really improved that much from his freshman year. And I think that is very fair. And he came in pretty far advanced. He went to IMG and everything. Right. And for people who don't know, IMG is a huge football factory in Florida. But I think it's fair to say he just hasn't improved. And he has been banged up. I think Franklin mentioned this before. Almost every offseason he's been banged up. So a lot of it isn't even really his fault. But when you're, Joe used to have a saying, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And he's not getting better. So I hear what you're saying. But do I think he's washed? I don't know if I would quite say it that way, but he's not getting better.
Yeah. Thank you guys for the fan questions. That will do it. We will be back potentially on Thanksgiving to talk about Maryland and Penn State Senior Day and final game of the regular season. The rankings come out on Tuesday, so we'll have a better idea where Penn State sits. If you are listening on podcast form, please make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. We got about 15 people listening live on YouTube. Please make sure you've already liked the video and subscribed on YouTube. And we will be back on Thursday. For Shawn Kane, I'm Cory Lestochi. You've been listening to Hardcore Penn State Football. Until next time, see y'all.